Hi, this is Eimear Barry for DeBarra Spoken Word. I spoke to Anton Floyd ahead of this month's event, Poetry, Music and Magic. The event is happening on the 26th of February in DeBarra's Folk Club and it's kicking off at 8:30. It promises to be a feast for the senses, bringing together live music and poetry in one space with some absolutely amazing contributors, Anton being one of them. And it was such a privilege to get an opportunity to speak to Anton to hear about his life as a teacher, an artistic director, a producer, and most of all, a writer. He has been widely published. He's won several prizes and awards, and it's no surprise. His work is truly magnificent. And it was just such a privilege to chat to him. We did have some technical difficulties, but we got through it and ended up having a very long conversation. So what you're going to hear is the highlights because I probably could have sat down and spoken to him for a month without getting bored and I'd still have 100 more questions. But thank you so much, Anton, for chatting to me and I can't wait to see how the event goes. Anton is a citizen of the world in the truest sense. He describes himself as a Levantine mix of English, Maltese, French, Lebanese and Irish. He was born in Cairo in Egypt and then raised in Cyprus. He and his family were held at gunpoint while they were evicted from their Nicosia home during the 60s, during the struggle for independence. So he has his own lived experience as a refugee and he was educated in Ireland, attended Trinity, but he and his wife married in Cyprus. It remained close to his heart and he told a beautiful story of their wedding day and walking through a freesia lawn and almost levitating with the scent. I won't attempt to recount it because I won't do it the same justice that he did. And I wish I could have just included everything that we spoke about. But it was a beautiful story. But I was also very interested to know what drew him back to Ireland.
So, I mean, when we came back to Ireland in the early 90s, well, mid 90s, we came back. We came back because our kids were my eldest kid at that time, Aegon, was 14, and there was no university in Cyprus. The only reputable university in the Levant was in Beirut, and that had been systematically destroyed, the war in the Lebanon. And in fact, I started a PhD at the AUB with Sohail Bushrui, who's professor of English and a world authority on Yeats, Synge and Joyce, as it happens. And he was twinned with Balliol Oxford, and his library was blown up 3 times. He was dean of the university, the English department of the university there, and eventually ended up at the University of Maryland, the chair of conflict resolution, which is, but he left. There was nothing in Cyprus. They were talking about setting up a university in Cyprus, but it was to be in a Greek university, as a Greek-speaking university, as opposed to an English medium one. And although the kids could speak Greek, we didn't feel that it would have had the weight in its early years to. So we decided to come back and get established here.
Now, as a native, asking someone why they would want to live in West Cork seems like a silly question. Even asking someone why they would want to live anywhere in County Cork is a silly question. It's obviously the most superior county in Ireland. But it was still lovely to have Anton reaffirm what we natives already know.
And Carol Ann wanted to have a relationship with her mum, so she went and she did a refresher course in ceramics in Limerick, which is it's the epicenter for ceramics in Ireland, the ceramics department at the art college there.
Mm-hmm. And design and so many things. I think they have an animation course. It's a very artistic course.
Very, and so she felt very much at home, and she had studied with the Denisons who were running the department before, and they knew her, and she went and she did another degree there, and she came away with a distinction, and she just loved it. But it gave her an opportunity to reestablish contact, because we'd been away traveling for about 15 years.
Hmm.
So it was an opportunity for her to get to know her mum again as an adult, more of an adult. And but we decided on Cork. Her oldest friend was living in Cork, and they put us up when we first arrived. We didn't want to go to Dublin because Dublin was so big, and with 4 children, we would end up being chauffeurs going from one school to another, you know. And Cork was just the right size.
So Anton is a multiple time winner of the Irish Haiku Society International competition. So I was interested to know how he originally found haiku.
I'll put it this way: I was born Catholic, and I took John as a confirmation name because I loved John Lennon. And I went through a John Lennon kick at one point, and I had a Japanese girlfriend who introduced me to haiku writing and Japanese aesthetics. And so haikus are 3-line poems, 17 syllables.
When I read Anton's poems, I feel like I'm being educated as I'm reading in a really enlightening and engaging way. And I thought it was really effective how he smuggled a lesson into each poem. And it's no surprise to me that he has had a very successful career as a principal and a teacher and an academic. And I think that's really informed the way that he writes, whether he realised it or not. I think it's very evident to the reader because we are taking on a lot of knowledge as we're reading. And I was interested to know what he thought about that.
Living life, you know, and being a teacher, and I was really quite committed in my teaching, and so I'd give a lot to it, you know, run plays, try and be as dynamic and well prepared in the classroom, spend a lot of time marking and working within the British educational system
Mm-hmm.
overseas. It meant, you know, small classes and intense relationships in the classroom. So very often, if I get a 5-page essay, I could write a 6-page answer to it. And if I got excited, that's what the nature of it was. And we do plays, and we wrote plays, and we wrote music to go with the plays. And but I kept writing all the time, but never really doing anything with it. You know, I was quite happy to read the poem to a coterie of friends, a little bit like the Elizabethans. You know, they would write their poems out and circulate them among friends. My primary reader is my wife, who's Irish, and I was quite satisfied with that.
Anyone who hasn't encountered Depositions, I would highly recommend it. It is a lovely experience. Reading it is a lovely experience, and it is jam-packed with feelings and stories and lived experiences, not just Anton's, but those he's come into contact with and formed really close, trusting relationships with. I think that really jumps from the page, and he presents it in these haiku-like tercets that are framed by formal poems. And it's just amazing how he manages to advocate for so many people and tell their story in so few words. It is really an achievement, and it, like I said to him, it packs a punch. And I was really interested to know how he developed that style and where it came from or who his mentors were, and he can articulate it a lot better than I can.
I see myself as being quite quiet and reflective. My family call me very garrulous, and I don't know why. uh, my my father was a great raconteur and a polyglot. You know, he spoke 8 languages, and he had stories to tell. I suppose because acquiring languages like that, you have to meet a lot of people. And one thing he told me, and I could witness it too, he says, for as many languages that you speak, there are as many people inside you. And I'm fluent Greek and rusty, broken French, And although French was my first language when I was growing up, and I know that when I speak Greek, my character changes. I become misogynistic, Mediterranean. No, that's not true. But it becomes so. He told me, in matters of style, to be as laconic as possible. And I had a poetry mentor who was living on a Greek island of Syros in the Peloponnese Islands in Greece, and he was the Athenian editor, the literary editor of the Athenian Post, and a very spiritual man. And he took me under his wing, and I used to send him poems, and he'd critique them and send them back. And he said, if you can cut a word, cut it out. Cut it out. If there's a word there, cut it out. It's not an easy read, but it does touch people in ways that has surprised me, because you're alone and you're writing these things. Mind you, that's only half true, because they're born out of lived experiences, my own, and things that I've experienced almost at first hand and second hand, but really the sources have been first hand, so that I know I could feel the authenticity of what I was being told, and could witness at first hand what was being experienced, the effects of what they were experiencing. So the thing is, when I was putting Falling Into Place together, there are 25 of these little tercets that had been published, but they didn't seem to fit in, and they would have taken up more room, and there were other poems that I wanted to include, and I didn't know what to do with them. And Mark Ulysses, who's the editor of Live Encounters, who wrote the introduction to Depositions when it was first published by DeBarra Press, he said, wait and see, you never know what might happen. And those 25 became 120, 125. They're still coming, by the way.
So this interview took place ahead of the DeBarra Spoken Word event, which is happening on the 26th of February at 8:30, if anyone didn't catch it at the start. It's a live music and poetry event, and Anton is going to be a contributor, but it's by no means his first time being involved in something like this. His poetry has been at the centre of very similar events that saw music, poetry, film, dance all together in one room, and I know that he's a big advocate for that, which isn't surprising because aside from being a poet, he's a teacher, he's a musical director, he's a producer. He has so many feathers in his cap. I think that's the right term. And I was really interested to know how he felt about bringing multiple art forms together at one event. I knew he'd see a lot of merit in it just based on what he's done in the past. And as usual, he didn't disappoint.
What art should do should elevate. And even when the ontological experience, I'm sorry to use a word like that, but the subjective experience of all human beings is one of loneliness. How much, there's a quest to be understood, isn't there? And that sense of reciprocity of being and belonging. Being is you're independent, and belonging, you're part of a group. And there are a whole series of compromises that are involved in all of that. I have to sacrifice a little bit of my independence in order to understand you, and to feel that degree of empathy with you, to be part of you, to be part of a group, rather than to be an out-and-out individual. Otherwise, it just won't work. The Aristotelian idea is my freedom begins where your freedom ends. You know, I have a right to music and you have a right to silence. And so we have to come to some sort of accommodation, you know, to work that out. And so because people have difficulties coming to poetry, and the topic of humanity being one, and I feel that right in the core of my being, that the planet is our homeland, and all the races, there's one human race, but there are so many different ethnicities, and those ethnicities bring something wonderful. We're fanatical gardeners here, and if all the flowers in the garden were the same, it wouldn't be particularly.
Mm-hmm.
And so too with ethnicity and culture. And I'm all for cross-cultural fertilization. And I'm a product of it, you know. On my parents' side, we're a real mix of nationalities. And so I felt if the message of the book is important, and how do you communicate that? And there are different kinds. I mean, there's a theory of multiple intelligences. You know, John Gardner, who is an applied psychologist, put this notion, which has been greatly misunderstood, that there are discrete parts of the brain that function independently. You know, that you're mathematical or scientific or kinetic or artistic or affective intelligences or linguistic intelligence and so on. And they did a lot of the work on that, particularly at UCC, as it happens, and it was affecting the way in which teaching methodologies were going on. You know, that different people have different ways of learning.
Mm-hmm.
You know, some people like to take linear notes, and some people like to take pattern notes, and so on. But John Gardner has said there's only one brain. They're not discrete elements. They all interact. So I thought the arts should be indivisible, you know, and there's a kind of a synesthetic approach to art.
Anton's poetry touches a lot on human nature, on family, friendships, relationships, hope, resilience, love, suffering, grief, loss, loneliness. I mean, it's really broad, but he also writes really beautifully of his natural surroundings. Nature in West Cork, nature in Cyprus. And I was interested to know whether, in Anton's opinion, nature is beautiful or nature is cruel. And here's what he had to say.
Well, I think there are two natures of man, really. Human beings, I hate man and women, you know, they can be sublime and they can be very negative. Music can take you to great heights and you can become quite bestial,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And what is it that makes the you know, distinguishes the human from the animals? I tell you, theoretically, everything is based on the idea of love. Magnetism is opposite poles, and it's the property that defines the mineral world. And then you progress up to the vegetable world, it has the same properties of magnetism, but that magnetism is expressed through growth, through life and death. It's part of that process. And then you progress further up, and you have the animal kingdom, and it's a sentient kingdom, and it has magnetism, it has growth, and it has the senses. All animals, you know, they have eyes, they can see, they can smell. And then you come to human beings, and human beings have all the properties of that magnetism of love, but then it becomes, you know, we have magnetism, we have growth, we have our senses, we move around, but we have self-knowledge too. And that's what distinguishes, we're questing beings, and if we put it all to some use. And I think we become bestial when we lose our empathy.
Mm-hmm.
Socrates says that reflection is the distinguishing, a reflective human being.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not a reflective human being, you're not a human being. And consequently, that part of the reflective process becomes empathic, and it becomes empathic if that's the way I see it. You respect everything that's there, even if you're a meat eater. If you respect the life that has gone into, that's part of that whole process.
Mm-hmm.
It's grateful, it's thankful, it's respectful. You become a steward of nature rather than the domination. You're not there to dominate. You're part and parcel of that whole process. And in the end, that's what it's the non-material things in life that become important.
Mm-hmm.
It's that reflective spirit that you bring to your life that makes it elevated. If you can laugh with people and cry with them, then you recognize people's loneliness. They don't become lonely.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much to Anton Floyd for giving so generously of his time and thoughts. It was a privilege for me to sit down and chat with him and pick his brain. I'm a huge fan of his work now, and I really look forward to seeing more of it. And if you'd like to see more of Anton, he will be on stage in DeBarra's Folk Club in Clonakilty on the 26th of February. It's kicking off at 8:30. He will be on stage with many other talented writers, and it's not too late for you to become a contributor. You simply need to send a clear recording of your work to debarraspokenword@gmail.com before midnight on the 12th of February to be in with a chance to share the stage with these absolutely phenomenal writers. So wishing everyone a lovely night in DeBarra's. Thank you so much to Ray and everyone involved in spoken word. It's been a pleasure to be part of it. Thank you.